Let's say you have an amazing new idea for a product, maybe a new revolutionary mobile phone app. You set up your business, you borrow money, you start developing it, and you advertise it to potential customers. And it's a success. Demand takes off, and you suddenly realize actually you can't do this by yourself. You need help to increase sales, write updates, and deal with customer queries. Now you have a new problem. You start hiring, and suddenly you have 100 employees who get paid whether the company changes the world or just barely breaks even. How do you get those 100 people to actually care? Welcome to the Strategy Show. In this episode, we're looking at how organizations try and give their operations focus. When you've got, say, a sole trader, you are the organization. It's very easy to ensure that everyone's working towards your idea of what the business should be when you're pretty much the only person in it. But as the business grows, how do you ensure that everyone who works for you has got the same goals that you do? How do you make sure that they work together in a coordinated manner? To answer that question, we're going to look at the concept of the mission statement and how organizations use them, as well as some of their pitfalls. We'll talk about how we can ensure our employees are paying attention to our mission through the use of objectives. Now, let's go back to our new software company. We're successful and we've started to expand our workforce. This is the reflection point where a business has to define its why. What's the purpose of its existence? Now, a primary motive is obviously earning a return for the owners. But, a quarterly profit target isn't going to inspire a software engineer to work through the weekend or a software coder to ensure they write really good quality new features. To get a growing workforce to cooperate and work together effectively, a business needs a mission statement. To understand how this actually functions beyond just being a corporate buzzword, there's a really useful framework called the Ashridge College Model, which bridges the gap between high-level boardroom strategy and everyday office culture. The Ashridge model argues that a truly functional mission statement has to integrate 4 distinct elements: purpose, strategy, policies, and values. Now, let's unpack the mechanism of how those 4 actually interact, because I think this is where most companies fail. Purpose is pretty straightforward, right? Why do we exist and who are we serving? And strategy is your commercial logic. How are we going to beat the competition? But it's the connection between policies and values that is really revealing. That's the linchpin of the whole model. Values are the core beliefs of the company, the things you want your employees to internalize and care about. But policies are the daily operational rules and standards of behavior. If your policies don't act as the physical proof of your values, the entire mission falls apart. For example, if a company's stated value is, we believe in fearless innovation, but their internal policy requires an employee to get 6 levels of managerial approval just to test a new software tool, then the policy is actively strangling the value. Employees will immediately realize the mission statement is just a lie and will ignore it, meaning that the mission's going to be a complete waste of time. When the 4 elements of the Ashridge model are fully integrated, the mission becomes a powerful, self-reinforcing tool. But when we look at real-world applications, it's clear that many major corporations completely missed the mark when they came up with their mission statements. There are some famously bad examples. Look at Coca-Cola's mission statements. For years, they've used phrases like to refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit, or to inspire moments of optimism and happiness. The fatal flaw there is the extreme ambiguity. If you apply the Ashridge model to that, how do you derive a concrete strategy or a policy from refreshing the spirit? You really can't. If you're a mid-level supply chain manager, how do you measure if your logistics route is adequately inspiring optimism? Well, you can't. Now contrast that vague, floating sentiment with some other examples, like Google's stated mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, or Patagonia's incredibly blunt mission, we're in business to save our home planet. Now, those are highly functional pieces of corporate architecture. Google's statement isn't just poetry, it's a rigid filter for their strategies. It justifies exactly why they build search engines, mapping software, and email platforms, because in each case, they're organizing information. If an engineer proposes building a line of luxury cars, leadership can just point to the mission and say, look, that doesn't fit our DNA as a company. And Patagonia's mission actually dictates their physical supply chain policies. If they have to choose between a cheap, highly polluting fabric and an expensive, sustainable one, the mission statement literally makes the decision for them. So, in theory, a good mission acts as a compass for the organization and helps define what its actions should be. But I have to play devil's advocate here. As a consumer and as an employee, it's really hard not to view most of these statements as very expensive, deeply cynical public relations exercises. When a massive global conglomerate claims they exist to, I don't know, nurture the human connection, it usually feels like something that's been thought up by an ad agency just to distract from their profit margins. I think that skepticism is entirely warranted. One of the primary criticisms that's leveled at mission statements is that they frequently devolve into just being PR fluff. When they aren't supported by the actual observable actions of senior management, employees view them with intense cynicism. They really just become wallpaper. But despite that risk of cynicism, a massive percentage of Fortune 500 and FTSE 250 companies continue to invest heavy resources into crafting these corporate purpose statements. So if it's so often perceived as just a cynical PR exercise, why is it virtually mandatory for large organizations? Well, to answer that, we have to introduce a crucial distinction that often gets blurred in corporate speak, that the difference between a mission and a vision. Now, let's break this down. A mission statement is anchored in the present. It defines who the company is right now, what it does, and why it exists today. A vision statement is inherently aspirational. It paints a picture of the future and where the company intends to be in, 10 or 20 years. So the mission is your current coordinates, and the vision is the destination on the map that you're trying to reach. However, the research from the Institute for Global Business Research provides a pretty sobering reality check on how these are actually utilized. Despite how common they are, researchers found that a staggering number of companies put almost no authentic effort into delivering these documents. The researchers point out that many companies write vision statements simply because it's just something to do. It's just a box to check so that the CEO looks like a visionary. It's the ultimate corporate copy-paste phenomenon. Because stakeholders expect to see these statements, organizations often just look at successful competitors and cannibalize their phrasing. The result is kind of a corporate landscape that is full of generic, interchangeable documents that don't really have any connection to the company's actual culture. But let's look at the bottom line here. If a company just copies a generic paragraph into their About Us page, does it actually hurt their financial performance? Well, research is kind of conflicted on whether having these statements definitely improves financial performance or not. Some studies show a direct correlation to high growth, while others find absolutely zero impact on your financial results, whether you have a mission statement or not. What causes that wild discrepancy? Why does a mission statement work for some organizations and fail entirely for others? The research indicates that these vision and mission statements only tend to boost performance when the vision is genuinely shared across the workforce, when they believe it. And critically, they only tend to work when they focus on stakeholder and customer needs rather than just, arrogant corporate achievements. We want X profit percentage or we want to make as much money as we can. But even if we have a brilliant mission and an inspiring vision, they're still just, abstract concepts living up in the clouds. To prevent them from being just motivational posters in the break room, a business has to figure out how to translate those very lofty ideals into the dirt and grind of daily operations. And this transition from the mission statement to the daily work of your employees is managed through the creation of a hierarchy of objectives. This is basically a cascading pyramid. You start at the very apex with the overarching mission that you've set up. That broad concept then feeds down into corporate objectives, which dictate what the entire enterprise needs to achieve this year. These then feed down into functional objectives, dividing the goals between departments like marketing, engineering, and finance. And then finally, right at the base of the pyramid, you have individual objectives for a single employee. That cascade is how you connect the CEO's 10-year vision to the specific tasks that a frontline worker is executing on a Tuesday morning. But for an objective to actually be effective at that ground level, it can't be vague. It has to be a SMART objective. Now, you may or may not have come across the acronym SMART before. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time constrained. There's a very sharp distinction between what we call open objectives and closed objectives that are SMART. If a manager sets an open objective, it'll be something like, we want to improve our customer service. That is functionally useless, because how do you even know when you've achieved it? You don't. Instead, we need to set closed, SMART objectives. And these would change your objectives to being something much more useful. Let's say, increase online revenues by 25% within 1 year. It's binary. You either hit the metric within the time frame or you don't. There's no room for ambiguity. So setting these objectives in this way at every level of the organization helps us to achieve our overall mission and pull together our large number of employees into a well-oiled machine, working together with one purpose. But it's probably just worth saying that care does have to be taken in how you set these metrics. Let's look at human nature for a second. What happens when my metric becomes the only thing I'm judged on? Let's say my manager and I agree that my SMART objective is to process 50 data sets by Friday. My performance review, my bonus, and my potential promotion are going to be entirely dependent on hitting that exact metric. The numbers become everything. You know, if the colleague sitting next to me is drowning in work and desperately needs help, I'm highly incentivized to ignore them, because stopping to help them means I might only process 45 data sets, and that hurts my metric. And with that observation, we've stepped right into the dark side of target-driven, objectives-driven cultures. It can inadvertently create an environment where individuals or entire departments become so hyper-focused on achieving their own specific targets that they just absolutely refuse to look beyond their little silos. Interdepartmental cooperation just breaks down completely. Teams stop sharing resources because the metric has essentially replaced the mission. The goal isn't, saving the planet anymore. The goal is hitting the Q3 widget quota. It narrows the field of vision dangerously, and this can severely stifle innovation. I mean, if an employee spots a brilliant new way to improve a product, but pursuing that creative idea means that they'll miss their kind of rigid, SMART goals, well, they simply won't do it. The system punishes deviation, even if the deviation would have been beneficial to the company as a whole. And honestly, the implications get even darker. If management sets inflexible production targets or sales targets, especially if jobs are on the line, it encourages employees to meet those targets through whatever means necessary, which often results in a catastrophic drop in quality because essentially everything is a rush job to try and meet those targets. It can, in some cases, even lead to outright deception. If the pressure is high enough, people will simply misreport the data. They'll literally lie about the numbers just to ensure that the SMART objective appears fulfilled on a spreadsheet. Which means if you're not careful, the very management framework that's been implemented to kind of align the company's daily operations with the grand vision and mission can actually end up damaging the organization from the inside out and rendering the mission statement entirely fraudulent. So, we've journeyed from the absolute peak of the corporate mission right down to the gritty reality of the ground floor today. For you listening to this, you now know exactly why you have to look past these beautifully crafted, PR driven mission statements featured on corporate websites. Because words are just the starting point. You have to look at the daily smart objectives that the staff are working towards. You have to uncover what metrics the employees are actually judged on to see if those targets truly align with the company's supposed DNA. Because if the daily metrics demand one thing and the mission statement promises another, then that beautiful mission is absolutely meaningless. The authentic values of any organization are never found in what they profess. They're found exclusively in what they measure, what they demand from their employees, and what they reward every single day. Imagine a company with a profoundly inspiring mission statement, something like, "We exist to heal the environment and empower local communities." It's a classic textbook mission. It sounds great on paper. But deep inside the building, management use kind of aggressive objectives to ruthlessly move employees towards demanding smart financial targets. And those kind of restless, suffocating pressures to hit those quarterly revenue targets are causing the workforce to cut safety corners, aggressively exploit natural resources, or underpay their workers, all to just make the spreadsheet maths work by Friday. If that's the reality on the ground, does their beautiful Heal the Environment mission statement ever actually exist at all? Or in the end, regardless of what the founder intended, do the metrics always become the true, undeniable mission of the business? Something to think about. Thanks to everyone listening for joining me on this episode. I hope you found it useful and hopefully interesting. If you have been listening, remember to follow us so you get notified of future episodes as they drop. See you next time.